Josh Donaldson era comes to an end with the New York Yankees. So he didn't even make it 2 seasons, and it is over. Josh Donaldson was on the 60-day IL and was due to be activated, I think, probably middle of September, thereabouts. And so by the Yankees releasing him, they're kind of doing him a favor, because if he can sign on to a team, by September 1st, so by the end of the week, Friday, approximately, he will be eligible for the playoff roster for whichever team he signs onto. So we'll see how that goes. But, this was an absolute failure. And, looking back on that trade, it was really bad. And I wanted it to, this goes without saying, I wanted it to work, right? So thinking back on it then, I was probably a little bit more optimistic about it, I think, than most, which isn't always the case. And I think a big reason was I was just so done with Gary Sanchez, but really, you could have just released him, right? You could have just released Gary Sanchez. Really, what you look at is Josh Donaldson versus Gio Urshela, and Gio was a very likable Yankee. Definitely, kind of a bit of a fan favorite, I would say, in his time from 2019 to 2021. And, I think it wasn't spoken enough how Gio really kind of did struggle in 2021. But even Gio, when struggling, is still like just a very likable guy and a guy that can help you win ball games. Maybe he doesn't grade out, the defensive metrics don't grade out well for Gio, but, when you look at the eye tests, he was certainly very impressive. At least I felt that way. Now, not to say Josh Donaldson's really one consistent strength with the Yankees was his defense. That did remain strong. But, the Yankees acquired Isaiah Kiner-Falefa as part of that deal, and that ultimately did not work out. Last year he was the starting shortstop, and we know how that went. And now this year he's more of a utility role, and he's done a nice job. But and then there's Ben Rortvedt, who finally now with the Trevino injury is getting playing time, and he's been Garrett Cole's personal catcher, but the numbers speak for themselves as far as Rortved's concerned. So the reason why that trade was such a failure more than anything is taking on Josh Donaldson's contract. You've got about everything else, right? Because for the Twins, Gary Sanchez, they let him walk in free agency. And he didn't really perform well for the Twins last season. And then Gio ends up being traded to the Angels. So, maybe something could come of that. I can't remember exactly who they acquired. I think it was probably prospects. But for Donaldson, that was I believe that was $46 million approximately, and maybe even more than that. I think that he signed a 4-year, $92 million contract with the Minnesota Twins. So this was a lot of money. Everyone says the number 50 million, and maybe that's an exact number. The point is there was a lot invested in Josh Donaldson, and Brian Cashman swung and missed, just like Josh Donaldson did many, many times as a Yank. So, let's talk about Donaldson's couple years. Look, we did this earlier this season with Aaron Hicks. Now, Aaron Hicks was with the Yankees a lot longer, so there was a lot more to discuss as far as Yankee career, less so with Donaldson, but Donaldson has an amazing track record. The one thing I did say I remember in that episode, and this trade definitely came as a shock, this was at a time where you knew the Yankees had to make a move of somewhat significance going into 2022, and this was kind of the big splash that was done. And, the thought was, okay, Donaldson can kind of change things in the clubhouse, the clubhouse dynamic, and kind of bring some more fire. And I kind of bought into that. I don't think he's the easiest to get along with. He seemed, within the clubhouse, he seemed fine. I think he was a bit of an outsider. And look, he was definitely, the oldest guy on the team. And, I don't think he caused any major disturbances, but you could tell, again, this isn't for me to speculate. He didn't seem like the most well-liked guy in the world, but but if he played well, we wouldn't even be talking about that. Josh Donaldson was a former MVP. He won the MVP, I believe, back in 2015 with the Blue Jays. Yeah, that makes sense. 41 homers, 123 RBIs. So, and he felt like a bit of a Yankee killer. Not a likable sort of dude. You know what I'm saying? He was one of those guys where I think if you have him on your team, you love him, and if he's not, you hate him. So there was always that. It's I don't like this guy, but I want to embrace him. Going into it, I wanted to embrace Josh Donaldson. It's just, I was always hopeful that he could do well, but that did not happen. So 2022, last season, his first season, if you remember, he starts off as the leadoff hitter. believe it or not. And that was a departure from DJ LeMahieu. Now, things eventually turned where LeMahieu did, come back to his customary leadoff role, and then Donaldson, dropped more into, I would say Donaldson as a Yank was mostly batting like 5th and 6th for the most part. And last year for Donaldson, got off to a slow start, but actually kind of turned it up. And then to me, what turned everything around negatively was the Tim Anderson-Jackie situation where, Donaldson, this must have been around May. And Donaldson looked like, if I remember correctly, he was hovering maybe around like an 800 OPS or maybe a little bit lower than that. But like he was kind of slowly coming on. And then that happened. And, and then I think an injury followed soon thereafter. And to me, everything kind of got worse from there. Not to say that anything was really that great to begin with. The defense was very, very good. I don't think he was a Gold Glove finalist, but he certainly was worthy of it. So that was always the one thing he had going for him. But, you had that. And look, like he put up worse numbers than Gio. And Brian Cashman was very sometimes, you want to be politically correct. Like Donaldson, Cashman said, Gio Urshela is no Josh Donaldson. And, that's a comment that's, always going to come back to bite Brian Cashman. So, you had the Donaldson walk-off grand slam against the Rays in a big game. And, there were some moments. A lot of what happened was he would pimp home runs and either, it would go off the wall. And it was always, he would kind of stunt and just admire his long shots that a lot of them didn't go out. Either they were caught or they went off the wall, like I said, or it just was a bit of a mess. I mean, that happened in the there was that sort of thing happened in the Cleveland series in the playoffs, game 1, where he ended up being tagged out between first and second. That was a thing that was bad for Donaldson. And just ultimately, the final numbers were 222 batting averages, 682 OPS, 15 homers and 62 RBIs in 132 games. So pretty bad across the board. And what was really bad is 148 strikeouts in 132 games. Josh Donaldson was really not a guy previous to that he struck out so much, way more than he had previously. Like, this was someone that was definitely declining. But if Josh Donaldson had Minnesota Twins numbers, Yankees would have taken that. Look, in his 2 years with the Twins, 842 OPS and 827 OPS. The batting averages weren't great, but at least you had that. It's funny. In the shortened, he only played 28 games in 2020, but he had a 222 batting average, which is exactly what he had last year. However, the OPS that year was 842. Last season was 682. Really, really bad. Really, really bad. The pop just simply wasn't there, right? So not only was the on-base percentage low at 308, but the slugging was low at 374. So let's fast forward to this year. He comes back. And we knew that was going to happen. They were kind of stuck with him with that contract. And, they were, Aaron Boone with John Boy and Jake and Talking Yanks. Last year he predicted correctly. They asked him, who's a guy who you kind of like, maybe a little someone that we don't always talk about. And he said Nestor Cortez, and he was right. This year he said Josh Donaldson, and he ended up being wrong. So within the first couple weeks of the season, he gets injured, a calf injury versus the Phillies in the second series. So that shut him down for a few months. He comes back, and I'll give Donaldson one bit of credit, just one bit of credit. He was hitting home runs. The slugging was 434, which, compared to the year before, was 374. And he had, the numbers were really weird and bad. He had 10 homers and 15 RBIs. He had 15 hits on the season, 10 homers, 1 double, and 4 singles. It was pretty fucked up. And it was embarrassing, but I do have to give him some credit. He did seem like he had a home run pop, and honestly, I would think a team probably will sign him. Assuming he's all in, which I think he would be. I think that someone would, because again, at bats per home run, was about 10, which is judge range. Again, the sample size is lower for Donaldson. Either way, though, his batting average comes out to 142. 142 batting average in 34 games. Extremely ugly. And the Donaldson, era as a Yank was bad. There's no way you can't sugarcoat it. And it's that contract as well that just made it so awful. Again, this is something that I wanted to work out, but it didn't happen. So now Josh Donaldson, as we speak, is a free agent. We saw Aaron Hicks sign on with the Baltimore Orioles, which like kind of came as a surprise. We'll see where Josh Donaldson lands, right? You know, it's kind of funny. Just came to me, like, did the Toronto Blue Jays, does he go back there? Matt Chapman just went on the injured list. So, again, just complete speculation, but, you know, we'll see if/where he goes, but his time as Yankee is done, and that's a good thing. And one point that I left out, of course, is, you know, the reasoning really, besides the obvious ineffectiveness, it's the fact that the Yankees are out of the playoff hunt. That's one. And two, they are going to be giving kids a chance. And so so it kind of caught me off. I was like, wait a minute, I know the Yankees are stubborn, but this makes no sense. I remember I was saying in the last episode, I believe in the Rays episode, that if Donaldson's coming back, that must mean that they have a plan to shut down Judge or Stanton. Clearly that's not the plan. And, you know, that they told Donaldson, look, like, once we activate you, we're not going to really be able to play you much. And so this is something that makes sense. Happy this is over with, and really frustrated that Twins-Yankees trade will go down. I don't know where you want to rank it, but it's one of Brian Cashman's worst trades. And that's saying a lot, coming from someone who desperately wanted Gary Sanchez gone. It really turned out about as bad as it could have possibly gone. So again, the Yankees release former MVP Josh Donaldson.